Hi, so I just finished reading the article about restorative justice. I thought the article was really interesting because it talked about the history of it. It compares it to like zero tolerance policy, and it also talks about the limitations and strengths. Oh, and of course, it also talks about the positivity of it. Uh, I didn't know that it was rooted, or some a lot of it was rooted with indigenous people strategies on disciplinary action in their community with like peace circles. I thought that was fantastic, and it made me think more about how every culture has a lot of value to it, and we need to really reach out and like listen and see what they do because we can learn something about it. um, I mean, I like that restorative justice works towards repairing relationships between the aggressor, the victim, and the community because, relationships are everything. If you use punitive action like send someone to prison or fine them or, alienate them from the community, they may not bounce back from that. Right now, they'll see themselves as a foreign actor in their community rather than someone that lives in the community. Um, and it works the same with schools. Let's say it's two students get into a fight. The aggressor will be alienated from their peers, teachers, and admin, and that again that'll ultimately have the student spiral. Um, the other thing that I did like a lot about restorative justice too is it talked about how when everyone is happy, when relationships are good, then the students learn better, and I 100% agree with that. I also like that with restorative justice, it talks about supporting the students' behaviors with intervention, consequences, and support using a framework. So you don't just immediately go with the worst consequences or the hardest hitting interventions at the start, right? You start light and you build up from there. Um, Definitely, there are a lot of limitations to it. To be honest with you, I'm more jaded with the restorative justice than not because the schools that I've worked at, quote unquote, use restorative justice and they don't, and it ends up making behaviors worse for students that already have a history of behaviors because they know they're going to get away with everything because there's no detention, there's no suspension unless something critical occurs. So then minor behaviors, well, not minor, but behaviors like elopement and all that, they just go. It's fine. It's all right. Uh, my biggest example is last year I had a when I was in my old school there was the dean of behaviors, and he was in charge of like training teachers for restorative justice, and he was there to mediate and all that, and nothing really happened with that. He had so much paperwork to do, so many meetings with staff and admin and parents and other bureaucratic responsibilities that by the end of the day he really didn't get to do much restorative justice with the students or let alone train anyone or anything, and most of the school wasn't even trained for it. So at the end of the day, no one was on the same page. A lot of teachers would just flat out attempt to use detention on their own time or use punitive action. So it made it very difficult. I tempted to use restorative justice with some of my students, and those students would go to another class, and anything that we attempted to do in my class was just moot because the student, restorative justice ended in my class basically, or with my class. Um, I think restorative justice in special education is incredibly important, like critical, because it makes no sense to me to give students with disability, especially emotional disability, detention, expulsion, or suspension, because they have the behavior, they have the IEP for a reason, right? Like we need to teach students in special education why their behaviors are incorrect, how those behaviors affect other students in the community, as well as how to mitigate or to help them self-regulate so that doesn't occur again. I think that special ed or students in special ed need to and honestly, students in general, they need to self-monitor, right? They need to learn that, or to monitor their behaviors. So using like a graph, or like a token system, right? Things of that nature that'll show the student that they're improving. And I think that's, that works well with restorative justice as well. Regardless, I think this was an extremely interesting article because, again, it talked about the history. It talked about how it's different from zero tolerance policy. And it also talked about the limitations and how it's a positive impact in schools. Again, as the article stated, when everyone's comfortable and happy, more work gets done. And, speaking from past experiences, my personal life and with everything, once a relationship is fractured because of a disagreement, that could be it for that, right? Whereas, so again, restorative justice is really good because it attempts to mend issues between people.